Hello, and welcome back to the Introvert Wine Podcast, where we explore wine thoughtfully, authentically, and sometimes quietly. I'm Xenia, and today's episode is a very special one, not only because we're talking about health and wine, but also because it's coming to you in the middle of the holiday season. Amongst all of the joys and festivities, it's a time of high pressure, deadlines, and sometimes holiday blues. So it's a moment when taking care of yourself and being especially mindful is more important than ever. This episode is also the final one of 2025, and I'd like to take a moment to reflect on it. This year, the podcast released 6 episodes covering topics from women in wine, sommelier in India, wine tourism, Rioja, to biodynamics, and the response has been incredible. These episodes have reached 57 countries and territories and impressive 345 cities around the world. It's been so rewarding to share thoughtful conversations about wine with such a diverse audience. Thank you. Health has been a red line for many of us in 2025, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and I thought it's fitting to close this year with a conversation that touches on all of those aspects. Today we're talking to Mark DeWolf, who's going to introduce himself in a second, a wine professional based in Halifax, Canada, who like me is an introvert and ADHD advocate. Mark has shared openly about his mental health, inclusivity in hospitality, and his own experiences navigating the wine world as someone neurodivergent. In this conversation, we will explore mindful drinking, mental well-being in the wine industry, neurodivergency, obviously, and what it means to create a culture that's healthier, more supportive, and more inclusive. So whether you are enjoying a glass of wine or a zero alcohol alternative, or just tuning in quietly, I invite you to join us for a reflective and honored conversation about wine, health, well-being, self-care as we close out this year. Welcome to my little Introvert Wine Podcast, my dear listeners. I've decided that it's really hot topic to tackle right now is health and wine and well-being in general, a topic that's been gaining a lot of attention worldwide. And I think time-wise also it's a perfect timing because we're just in between sober October and dry January, a perfect moment to explore and see the nuances rather than the extremes. And I'm really happy that I'm joined today by Mark DeWolf, a great friend, a great person, and I let Mark introduce himself briefly and speak about his background, what does he do, where does he come in this picture, and then we'll tackle the health topic.
So I'm Mark. The bio. I think we always connection between myself and Xenia, of course, as we both work with ASI and have lovingly done so for a number of years now. And I work in content management and editorial. So I get to tell the stories of sommeliers around the world, which is a very lovely position to have. And in my daily life, I'm a bit entrepreneurial. So I have a kind of a wine and food travel company. I run some large events like a big wine festival, big spirit festival, an Italian festival, and have 3 lovely children, a cat, a beautiful partner, a couple of dogs. So yeah, that's about me in a minute or less.
Yeah, I hope you'll understand why it's exactly Mark who I wanted to speak about this topic, because a lot of people find it controversial. It's not still very, I feel, often and easy to talk about health in wine, mental health, physical health, and there is a lot of current debate around the topic, both cultural and clinical, about where is it, if it's a moderation or abstinence, and overall the relationship with alcohol and wellness. So suddenly, Mark, this health and wine topic seems to be the hot topic of the year. Everybody is writing about it, talking about it. Why do you think it has resurfaced so strongly, like this moment particular?
I'm not sure it's resurfaces as much as I think that, like the discussion of health and wine is just become a much more part of a larger discussion on health and wellness. And, I think the undercurrents have been probably going on for longer than we think, and I think it's just hitting the wine industry now. So if we think about, that locavore movement, this idea of understanding where food comes from and looking for products that are more natural really kind of emerged in full force in the late 90s and early 2000s. But I mean, I'm sure even earlier in parts of like California where you have like Chez Panisse and thing. I think what's really driving the movement now is this kind of greater scrutiny of truth in packaging. And so I think we've been for the last 20 years been asking more of the food industry, and I think it's just hitting the wine industry now to be a little more transparent in what's actually in wine. And so yeah, some byproducts of that in terms of looking at its relationship with cancer and alcoholism and things like that. But I think big thing is that why it's resurfacing for me is that we put much more emphasis on understanding what we put into our body, and I think it's just a natural evolution from food to drink.
I agree with you about the packaging and more transparency and openness angle of it, because it's been obligatory, at least in the European Union, since last December, to put exactly the ingredients and the calorie count and all of this, what is in the bottle, let's say, and byproducts and the remainders of a lot of things, which is not still, I'd say, perfectly transparent or clear to customers, to people who actually consume it. But then the debate this year has, I feel like, shifted to a whole new level of the packaging that's considering the health warnings. And you're based in Canada, and there's been, I feel, a debate on very high level, the highest level, where the packaging conversation has become very intense about with the discussions, the cancer warning, should there be on the alcohol labels, should the alcohol, it's already sold in its specific stores or even aisles, but should it be covered, like the tobacco is completely covered in some parts of the world where you don't even see the actual packaging. So what's the mood among professional and consumers, and what's your take on all of this debate?
For sure, because I mean, in Canada, I mean, it is a topic of discussion. There is actually a bill out there that's been proposed to put mandatory cancer warning labels on all alcohol products. So, and there's been edits in the number of drinks that constitutes a healthy enjoyment of beverage alcohol, and that's been reduced dramatically in Canada over the last couple of years. Where I think, and we'll dig into this deeper. I've certainly grown up with my own troubles with alcohol abuse, of a parent that was an alcoholic, and then my own challenges at certain points in my life. But the number of drinks, I used to count on 12 or 14 being that a week of being you cross that line. That used to be the old standard of what was risky consumption. And now with the Canada, we're talking about 3 to 6 being the entry level to risk. So from a consumer perspective, I think there is probably broad support. We are a fairly liberal country, so exclusion of the Alberta, we are a pretty liberal country in Canada. So I think there's probably, from a consumer side, general support for some warning labels. I think from, if I take my consumer and industry hat and kind of blend the two, I think maybe that we should promote more one, transparency ingredients for sure. Like, we should state, because I think most of the public has no understanding that they think Cabernet is a Cabernet, but me and you both know that in different countries, a Cabernet may naturally versus one that is a, let's say, a commercial product from certain places in the world, could have up to, I know in certain, I won't say where, but up to, very public, that up to like 70, 80 additives, so I think we're a bit confused. Should we put cancer labels on? I think we should put transparency first. I think we're always right to advocate moderation, but I'm not sure the studies are completely clear in terms of how the direct link between alcohol consumption, particularly I live in the wine world, wine consumption links to cancer. So I think there's a lot, I think it's a complex mix of factors that go into connecting the dots. And I'm not sure that we've done the full studies or clearly articulated, at least governments, that it's a direct link between one and the other. And so I kind of veered to industry in that I think we should promote moderation. I think we should promote transparency, but I'm not sure that we have to scaremonger people into cancer risk yet, until such time as we have a little bit better data in terms of the true connectivity between one and the other.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of really interesting takes on it, and I really enjoyed a talk by Felicity Carter, who does a lot of research and a lot of, well, she writes a lot about this topic and she follows it really in detail. And I feel like you're very close to what she mentioned already. Let's first communicate and educate on potential dangers and warnings rather than going to the extreme and saying it's a poison, basically. The debate also is very, let's say, curious because I feel like in a lot of sense, we live in this wine bubble because we work with wine. For us, it's so much more than just alcohol. So we are deeply involved and we have, as you said, a lot of knowledge and understanding of different varieties, regions, culture, tradition, history, and all of it. So for us, I think that brings as well a lot of respect and admiration to wine. So we do not just treat it as only alcohol, whereas the broader consumer is not there yet. So just assume that they know about different cultural aspects or wine and food pairings or the whole wine consumption culture is far, far from truth. And I love this line of thought when you say there is a risk. It is, alcohol is dangerous. There is a certain danger and risks and health warnings involved, but to go directly from A to B is like it directly to cancer, I think it's a bit extreme. The talk, well, it's now been postponed by the UN until 2030 of the no safe dose communication on all alcoholic beverages. We're not only speaking about wine here, it's all alcohol that is involved, both spirits and beers and everything that contains alcohol. So at least there is a little bit of a lag of, let's say, a couple of years for the wine industry to understand how we react and how we evolve and how we adapt and what should be, let's say, communication and moderation or healthy relationship or consumption advice. But even though there is this UN documents, there's also the talk of the World Health Organization. They directly do not influence, they do not make the laws for specific countries. It's then the countries like Canada or any other countries. A curious example is Ireland, where actually passed the law that they have to label it, and then it was put on hold because I feel like they understood what it entails and how much of a change they need also to bring to the point of sales, to producers, to imports, to the bigger business than just labeling the alcohol. So I think
Yeah, I
that's
mean, it's a pretty complex
important.
subject, right? I mean, it's practically like you look at like places like I mean, it's very complex, particularly in places like Canada, Scandinavia, Northern Europe, where you have this blend of altruism, but also that economic reality of these places that are governed where it's perverse in a way that like in a country like Canada, we want to be altruistic and oh, we're going to save you from all evils, yet we rely so heavily on alcohol tax as
Mm.
a form of government income, and so it's really bizarre. So I'm sure the government is torn, like and I think like I think it really boils down and it's the simplicity of transparency and being a little more diligent in how we work with our alcohol, like in Canada, like how do we work with our alcohol partners? Let's be transparent. What do you put in it? What's your processing? Maybe focus less on those mega brands that are adultering, because I question whether it's all alcohol or I mean I'm no scientist, although I should ask my sister. She's a PhD in biochemical engineering, so I should ask her these questions. But that is that link really alcohol or is it the link some of the other things, like what else is in there? And I think it goes to transparency. I think we should be focusing and encouraging our government retail buyers to focus less on the perhaps the mass production and support the industry as it moves towards more. And I don't want to use the word natural wine, but it's not natural wine as wine geeks think. I think of supporting people in the industry as it moves towards less input into their wine production. And I think what's encouraging, even despite the challenges going on today in terms of what you're talking about, is that in reality a lot of these new winemakers that are in their 20s and 30s and maybe even early 40s. I'm in my 50s, so I can say they're young. We see a movement away from what their parents were doing in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, that they're actually saying, yeah, we have the scientific understanding now not to add all that stuff to our wines. And how do we support that? Because I think that's a story that's getting lost here, is that there is an undercurrent in the wine industry, particularly amongst our new generation, to be more thoughtful in terms of
Mm.
moderation, being more careful in what they add and don't do in the vineyard and in the winery, in the distillery. So I think that's getting a little bit lost in the conversation too.
Yeah, and I feel that they, in so many ways, they do not feel that there is an urge to explain or to talk what they're not doing, and they focus on what they're doing in terms of being biodynamic or organic or having low intervention, all of it. But I feel like it's also a very curious insight as to the consumers and winemakers based in the wine producing countries and how their wine consumption culture is versus the countries that do not produce well at all or small amounts. That the conversation and perception of what is moderation, what is a healthy relationship with wine or alcohol overall, is very, very different. So I feel like Europe, Italy, France, Spain are not in favor, not supporting the no safe dose because wine is such a big part of their diet, normal everyday diet, that they don't even understand why there is this talk about moderation and not, a healthy level of consumption. And I also,
100%.
yeah, it's just curious to see that the talking being in France very different to what's happening in Canada, and also going back to Kazakhstan where I'm from, because in Kazakhstan it's restricted to the time of hour per day where you can buy alcohol and what's the level of alcohol that you can buy at certain times, which is, I mean, on top of being of legal age and etc. etc. So I feel like wine industry is really afraid to go into the extremes again because apparently we still remember the being like total prohibition or waves of prohibition in different countries that did not lead to any healthy consumption or development of healthy relationship with alcohol. So it's curious, yeah, to see, some steps forward and
Does
then two
government
steps
regulation
backward.
on all this stuff really work or not? Because I mean, you're talking about places like Kazakhstan and Canada and Scandinavia. Government has been had that responsibility to kind of, I don't say market the story, but they
Mm.
certainly are telling the story, and how they told the story. I'm not sure it's been a great for the industry and the truths behind the industry.
Now, I've seen in Scandinavia this shift towards a lot heavy regulation of what you drink, where it's sold, how it's sold, to being more educational and then making a lot of efforts to source sustainable wines, to market them in the sustainable way. So I feel there is a shift of not just
For sure.
restricting what you drink, but also looking into the content of what is sold and why it is sold there. So I think maybe
Yeah,
it's
and
the
totally. I
next
think, I'm
level.
looping Scandinavia in just because of how they run their systems. But I think in terms of progressiveness, they are way more progressive than let's say Canada, who still, I mean, we're still in the vestiges of prohibition. Like I mean, it's a bizarre country where we have, and we layer in this kind of provincial territories so that alcohol is really thrown to management of 11 the provinces that bizarrely enough, Canada, we don't have really free trade amongst our own within Canada, bizarrely enough. And so the government announced that they were creating basically a free trade agreement in a sense across the provinces, except alcohol was not included.
Mm.
So alcohol and food were not included, and I mean that's a statement in itself that how protectionist, and the way they view this is.
How do you build your relationship, your perception of healthy relationship with wine, and what are the tips that you can share perhaps with the consumers and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
they
and
can
so
approach it?
yeah, so for myself, really, I focus perhaps less on the more on mental health aspect of health, in terms of my relationship for alcohol. And for me, it is about, having this mental awareness as it relates to moderation. I can say in the past I've been guilty of daily drinking, and certainly in my early years, let's say my late teens, 20s, of drinking too much. Wine and alcohol, like it or not, is a drug. So we should view it as one, that it is, enjoyable and has lots of cultural context, and I love it with food. But we can't lose sight of the fact that it is a drug. So, and some of us, it depends on how we're wired, are more likely to fall into this kind of realm of addiction. And so for me, it's been really important to not constantly surround myself with alcohol. And actually, luckily enough, I went, and it doesn't sound likely, but I went through a divorce, you know, a little over 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And in that process, I actually had to leave most of my cellar behind. You know, I had like any, you know, wine geek, 500, 600 bottles of wine sitting in the basement. And I left with maybe 2 cases of wine or 3 cases of wine, just kind of some nice special bottles. And now in my current situation, I don't have a cellar at all. So even like the special bottles I have, I don't actually house them at my residence. So one thing I've done is been able I have to do it because I have a more addictive personality and I'm very mentally aware of that. So I actually try to keep alcohol away from temptation. So if I want wine for an evening, I either have to go to my locker in this little private club I'm part of, or I have to go buy it. So I don't have on a daily basis that temptation, which is important for me. So I think in terms of health, and I'm obviously leaning towards the mental health side of it and the addiction qualities is being always sure, like recognizing what it is and that it is a drug, and then forming your relationship around it to suit your needs. For me, it's about not having easy access. It's about that alcohol cannot be a substitute for a mental health, so that when I feel go into a depressive state or I'm not feeling great on the day, not having those easy access. So when you're sad, you can't treat liquid alcohol as a medication, and that's it. For me, it's been really important to be super mentally aware of the dangers of thinking of alcohol as some kind of way out of a situation. And so now, even though I say that, you know, I keep my wine separate, I very, very rarely drink to any excess. I'll have a bottle of wine or two sometimes with my beautiful partner Tracy, who's, and you know, is the most lovely, beautiful woman in the world. I cut out. I stopped. It's been taken a lot of years to get here, but it's a mental process of that is not the solution, and that does not make me happy. Right? It's the people around me make me happy. It's what I'm doing makes me happy. Alcohol for the sake of alcohol is not happiness. Alcohol for the sense of being with the person you love, having a dinner or a glass of wine, watching a movie, and they feel that is happiness. But the alcohol itself, I can equate to that. So I take very much a mental health kind of thought process to this.
I admire the approach, really. I feel what changed my habit and the whole choice of whether I'm drinking or not drinking wine at a certain moment is when I started to do the Master of Wine. And one of the things they tell you is every every sip, every wine you have is now a study opportunity, and you are not drinking for pleasure anymore. You are drinking because you are in this program and you want to understand wine. And when you have to go through this mental dissecting the wine, through this mental process of like what I'm drinking, where it comes from, what was done to it, then obviously you want every wine to be a special wine and a special occasion. So you do not have time for drinking for the purpose of drinking, even though it has to be obviously a pleasurable occasion, but you have this analytical side the whole time with you, and you're not going to drink just as you said, just to, I don't know, to fill in the time that you have, because you now understand how much thought process you need to to support it
Yeah.
with, that just drinking is not fun anymore. And this choice has, I think, has been for me instrumental. And also working in the wine industry, to having access to wine all the time, I think it's such a big, well, of course, a blessing too, if you appreciate the wines, if you have access to incredible wine bottles, but also it creates a lot of opportunities where I drink without having to drink actually. And I still find, because I did recently a training with wine in moderation, so if anyone is interested, really helpful consumption tips that even I discovered after so many years in the industry, that I pay attention now, that at some tastings there's still no water, no spittoon, and no snacks. And that for me sometimes is just the basis of, if you don't have a choice of spitting or not spitting, how can you make this choice if it's not even given to you? And this very simple things, or like, providing water or like having some bread, which can slow down and help with the, let's say, pacing your tasting
The
experience.
absorption of the alcohol into your blood system if
It's
you have
really
food,
simple
right?
steps, and they're still ignored in the wine business, which should be the example of how you treat the wine
Oh,
consumption overall. It's surprising to me, but I guess
yeah, no,
that,
no, it's shocking. I'm sure you've been in those tastings with, like I have, where you go through 100 glasses of wine and there's
yeah,
not a water or a piece of bread
no,
there, and you're like,
no,
how the frig are you supposed to do this?
exactly.
And I love your point too about, I actually, if I, because I assume we'll have some sommeliers and wine students listening just by basis of your network. And I think, I love that point about, in that master of wine process. I mean, I don't love the point about like not enjoying it anymore. I mean, I enjoy it, and I can do it, dissect the two. So I can have a bottle of not fancy wine with my partner Tracy over dinner and love it. I mean, and it's not thinking about the wine, and it's the context of just being with the person you love and having sharing. That makes sense. But I
Mhm.
love also the idea that in terms of when we moderate ourselves, those times when we're drinking, let's say, more analytically, we are more analytic. And I found that when I was going through this period of like perhaps drinking too much every day, having easy access to wine, I lost that a bit. I went from my 20s when, I was really young and in the business and, did the SOM program, did really well here in Canada when I went through my program, and was like just like on top of it. And, I think I remember the tasting exam. When we did it, like it was like 20. I'm old school. I'm 2001, so we just did this final tasting exam. It was like 28 wines. What are they? And I got 26 of 28, right? And then I went through the 30s and periods in life when I'm not ashamed to say I would stink at it because wine was just blending through. And now that I've gone back to more moderation, I find my palate is so reinvigorated now, and I'm so much better because now when I lead a tasting or go to a tasting, I'm my mind, my body is clearer. I have more focus. I'm much more intuitive. I feel like I'm a better instructor or relator of knowledge to my guests because it doesn't just all blend through anymore. I'm thinking more analytically and can tell the story of that wine. I feel like it's been really positive for me. So moderation is good, but just you can still enjoy it a bit because I would
Yeah,
hate the fact
no, for
like
sure.
if,
Yeah.
if we don't enjoy if we don't enjoy it, why are we doing this? Like I mean, yeah, I mean, wine is not saving the world. So if we get to like the opposite direction of
Mm.
where there's not enjoyment, it's just analytics, and then I think we've also lost that cultural aspect of wine, that wine should be on a table with friends and family members, and
And
that I don't want to lose sight of the enjoyment of wine either. In all this, we have to be moderate, but I don't want to lose the joy of it because otherwise, yeah, why bother?
I think part of this pleasure component and enjoying it is such a strong factor that the no low alcohol wines are struggling a lot, because very few of them, I'd say maybe I can count them with my one hand, the wines that have like no alcohol or lower alcohol, that would be exciting for me to taste. And that's why, of
Yeah,
course, the industry is growing and booming and they're learning. And I've actually tasted some wines that are already decent and good, but they're not on the same level as the, well,
yeah,
let's say, call
and it
them
is
not
a real
normal
challenge.
wines.
I mean, alcohol I mean, outside of its mental state, what it does to our mental state. I mean, what it does do is give body, right, and texture, and
Hmm.
that's the big criticism. My biggest criticism of the non-alcohol wine is they lack that kind of mid palate They just
Yeah.
fall away.
Yeah, I have
And
friends who
and
work in
it's very
wine.
complex. I don't know if the world, the public world understands, like, and they probably go question why they're so expensive, right? Because,
Mm,
but it's hard. It's absolutely insanely challenging, I think, to
yeah.
make good, because you lose in those processes, though, that they do to de-alcoholize. You're losing, your aromatics, and how you having to kind of like then replace them. I'm not sure. I'm not even totally sure. And I'm saying this as we speak, that why bother? Like, I mean, because it's a danger too that we're going to get non-alcohol wine, and we're trying to improve it. We're stripping out, we're de-alcoholizing, stripping out alcohol, stripping out other things. Then we're actually having to add it all back, things back in. Are we dangerously going back to manipulation? Well, like, in a way, like, like, if for me, I think that the great strength of the wine industry going forward is reducing its manipulation, adulteration. I question whether the non-alcohol wine field is just going into this cloudy area
Mm,
of its own manipulation. And that once big brands get a hold of non-alcoholic, right, and see, oh, okay, as we lose growth, as we lose market share in our traditional wine, we see, millennial, the young and Gen Z's, the world of drinking non-alcohol. God knows they're all jumping in on it. So I think, again, goes back to transparency. I don't trust those big companies when they enter in and take all their marketing dollars, and it's survival, like it
mm,
is for a lot of those big companies, when they lose 10% market share, 15, we're talking millions and millions of dollars. So they will invest millions and millions of dollars to try to grab that piece of that new market share. And will they do it with health consciousness in mind? No, they're going to do it to put on the get a the company from New York to design the label and the brand that most attracts that consumer. And shit, if we have to throw in all this chemical shit to get to that flavor component that they like, well, we'll just do that, right? So it
mm.
all boils back down to transparency. But I think, like, why bother? Like, why we should, in the wine world, if it doesn't really work, why don't we just celebrate other things that are great non-alcoholic drinks? I don't If we're not going to make good things that taste like wine easily or naturally, that are at low or no alcohol, like,
I
should
think
we
there
be
are
bothered? Should we just go
two
back to, like,
two parallel processes that go. One is I still want to have wine that has alcohol and all these flavors and all this texture, but I would probably drink like less wine but better wine to still have this element in my life. And there is the no low movement, because also do not forget that there are people who might not willing to drink alcohol for religious reasons, for being pregnant, and they're not moderating, but they are living through it as a choice or having a moment that they cannot drink the wine. And I've noticed the improvement is there. So technologically speaking, it's getting better.
yeah.
What I've tried 3 years ago, even last year, and what I've tried this year has been tremendous, I think, improvement, and we're learning how to do it. And I believe both options can be there, and it's a choice that you can do for yourself. And that doesn't have to be only this or that. Why not? And why this, for example, day a week, which is called, I think, the zebra drinking pattern, is that today I don't want to have alcohol, but I still want to have a perception of Sauvignon Blanc, something that smells
Yeah.
fresh, green, high acidity. But this week, for example, I'm not feeling like I should be drinking alcohol. Why do I have to make this choice, first of all, forever? And then
Mhm.
stick with just one camp? Why not switch? And I
Well,
think
well,
for
hopefully the
the,
wine becomes, like I say, it is getting better. I mean, it was
yeah,
god awful, like, 4 or 5 years ago, most of it. And well, just about all of it. We are getting better. I mean, I'll say this is how I deal with. I go to beer. So I think in terms of the non-alcoholic options in the beverage world, wine is maybe still in third place. Maybe, I mean, maybe the spirits is still a little.
mm-hmm,
I'll give them, they're equal, but beer is certainly well ahead in
yeah,
terms of ability to deliver a beer like experience.
mm,
And I mean, it has the advantage, of course, that, like a natural beer is, 4.5. 6.5% alcohol. So the reduction of alcohol is less extreme than, let's say, in
Yeah.
spirits or wine. So therefore, naturally, they're going to be it's a bit of an easier process to get there. But I mean, that's how I deal with it. Like, so instead of like buying a $20 bottle of non-alcoholic wine, that I go, I don't get it. Like, it's not me. I don't find it all that enjoyable. Me and my partner do is to mitigate that risk of alcohol, the alcohol joy, and getting to your head and losing your inhibitions, and go getting usually to that second bottle of wine or that third bottle of wine, which is we start our nights start with non-alcoholic beer. So what we know we're going to move into wine, with dinner or whatever. But when we're just sitting down after the day of work and we're kind of taking that moment to just kind of absorb and chat, and if it's just watching the news together or whatever, and before dinner, we have non-alcoholic beer has become our way of satisfying that we're both in our later years. Let's just say we're older than Xenia. We're way older. We're in our we're both plus 50. That we found that the non-alcoholic beer is that way for us to kind of blend the two, and having that option has been really it's been great, and so
I think you're ruining the concept that NOLO is only for younger generation. So the
yes, well,
marketing.
yeah, well, I mean, I think the older generation does have, like, because reality is that people that probably abuse alcohol the most are in that plus 45, plus 50, like, broadly speaking. And so I think it'd be great if we could have encouraged, that generation to for moderation, like, so
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
abstinence, moderation.
So you've mentioned several times that you're ADHD and I am too, so both of us are here beautiful examples. I wonder if you have noticed if it has shaped your career in wine, or if you feel like there are certain career paths for people who do have ADHD. I don't know, do you feel like looking back on your career that it had an influence of in what area of wine business you work or not?
I wouldn't be in the wine business if I didn't have ADHD and undiagnosed ADHD. So I think if you look at my, like, family, like, certainly I have a very educated family, and growing up, I did had undiagnosed ADHD. So I had challenges not so much. I did well in school, well enough in school, but simply by being, I think, smart enough to get around my challenges with ADHD, so I could absorb enough information from a class or whatever, and I went through school. But as I got older, let's say, and into my university years, that it wasn't as easy, going through junior high school, being just smart, and yeah, I can figure that out. Whatever, blah blah blah. It's done. It's easy. Going even through my first couple years of university. Yeah, okay. But when I got into my, like, third and fourth years of university, it's when my life started taking shape, because you can't just do advanced macro or microeconomic theory and advanced calculus classes and advanced mathematics without being able to concentrate and think. And so I graduated, that's fine, but I certainly, I was no longer able in the path that I was going down to be able to succeed. I didn't know it then, and I mean, I didn't sort of know it, but I didn't. I knew that I couldn't concentrate. Like, I literally had reading a 3 pages at a time was, like, exceptionally hard, and I'd be going back and going back, and then and having to redo this. So in a way, that because I had ADHD and I couldn't really go down this kind of where I thought I was going down, with, like, a PhD in economics or going into that, finance or anything. I couldn't do that. And so I burned out. I didn't know what to do. I was miserable. I was doing kind of a clerical-ish job in Toronto. Not happy. Moved back home. and then I did like anybody else that was in that period of mental struggle, or I just needed work, and so I happened to land in the restaurant business, right? And from being in the restaurant business, I wanted to advance and things like that. And then wine became this and beverage. I was into beer. I should say I was into beer before wine, and the ultimate beer geek. Way before it was cool, I was volunteering at microbreweries pulling grain, like we're talking mid 90s. And then when I got back, I went to restaurants, and wine and study of wine became the one thing I could focus on. And so the only books I could read and enjoy and focus and create cue cards and really study, it was wine. And so wine, in a way, was a double-edged sword. It was a savior that I was, and certainly kind of ironic for someone that had issues of alcohol addiction, addictive personality, and ADHD, and depression, and all these things. That in a way, wine was a savior. It was a risk too, because I was throwing myself more into the pot of what was not healthy for me in a way, but it was also my savior because food, wine, beer, these things are my inherent passion. Like I love them, and I love flavor, and I love that. So in a way, that wine was the one place where I could focus my energy, and certainly ADHD, like I said, formulated how I work in the wine industry, so that I tell everybody, because I don't think like normal people. I don't think in A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like I can't. My mind does not let me do that. And those that have this disease that can, like I think you are one of these great examples of someone that may have ADHD, but that can create linear thought processes and stick to plans. With mine, I jump, and my mind is, I'm on one idea, then the next idea, the next idea, the next idea, and so editorial became a great thing for me because it allowed me to be creative and doing in short periods of time. So whether it's setting up a photo shoot, I used to do a lot of like food styling and food photography, and food recipe development and stuff like that. It allowed me to create a job that wasn't a job about planning and following A to B, C, D, D. It was about, oh, I'm going to do A today and C tomorrow, and maybe I'll jump back to B, and then I can go to H. And then as long as at the end of the 2 month period, I've got enough material that I can get to pull the end result Z. As long as I've got enough material, I can mix it back together, right? So in a way, that editorial became this very good fit for me because I could allow my ADHD to be it didn't impact me as negatively as it would have in jobs that required more linear thinking, more structure. It actually was it was structure. There's always structure behind it, right? There are dates and things and timelines, but it just let me go to start to end in a way that was worked for my brain and how I was functioning for most of my life. So it definitely
I
has
like,
formed my
yeah,
career in that way.
I love that you say that, well, actually learning wine, studying wine, working in wine actually helps and supports ADHD, and it feels like it's a good mix because I felt the same. And it's also curious that a lot of people speak about hospitality and see hospitality as very overstimulating. There's long hours, it's physically challenging, there's a lot of pressure, but it in a certain weird way, maybe not productive, but it kind of makes the ADHD people thrive because if there is different
Yes.
stimulation, then you are not bored.
And it's
You're,
short.
yeah.
You're not when you're in the hospitality, and when I was like on the floor doing a psalm on the floor, or being a maitre d or a waiter, it's short interactions, it's short stimulations, right? Like it's not, you don't have that table that's in for 2 hours. I mean, that's as long as you have to focus on them. You do not have to think then, what are they doing tomorrow, and how do we create something for them to be happy in 2 months from now? No, you have to go in and cultivate that experience for a very concentrated amount of time. Yeah, and you do this, and it's hyper, and it's so it's in a way, I'm sure there's a lot of people with ADHD working in on the front of the house because we're always constantly looking, and I don't know for you,
Mm.
speak for you, but I
Mm-hmm.
do have that kind of all constant search for, little hits of dopamine hits or little hits of, that I need. And so they're working and I actually I actually keep debating if I should just go back to the floor and forget about this entrepreneurial life that I have, because it's way more complicated. And I miss my want for those little hits of dopamine, and my ADHD self says, go back to being a waiter because of the energy and that kind of brain buzz
Mm,
that
mm,
it could help me good, but
mm.
it's short term. It's good that I'm probably not in it all the time. But
No, but also, yeah, I see it and I agree with a lot of things, but also I've been discussing it with a lot of people over the past 2 years because the podcast is called Introvert Wine Podcast, and I'm an introvert. And I was thinking that, well, alongside with ADHD, it somehow shapes where in the wine industry you can work or where you want to work. So, for example, you do want to work in the front of house, or you don't work because of like you're an introvert or because you have this ADHD. But I think it's very massively misunderstood in hospitality. And I've had very cool conversations with a lot of sommeliers throughout this year at different competitions, at different examinations and events. And it's considered that they work front of house because they're very outgoing, extroverted personalities, when in a lot of cases they're not. And
yeah,
if you meet them in a more intimate, let's say, conversation, like two people set up, that they're completely introverted and very close personalities, very nerdy, very geeky in a lot of ways. Some of them have told me, I'm not gonna tell who exactly, but is them seeing the service part or the competition part as a performance. So they treat it as a performance art, as if you're a singer, if you're, I don't know, an actor in a theater, and this is how they deal with it. And then for me at least, it's explained so many things and so many levels of how they can be introverts and completely fine with this part of their nature, but still go on stage and perform absolutely brilliantly or be the most welcoming, extroverted personality on the floor when they're doing service in their restaurants. And this has been, I think, one of the major insights for me this year of seeing that you don't have to. Being an introvert or being ADHD doesn't have to limit what you do in your career, being wine business or not wine business, but kind of guiding and letting you adapt to how you tackle it. So it doesn't say that, oh, you're an introvert, you cannot be working in front of house. No, doesn't have to be like that. It's the
no,
way how
and
you
I
approach it.
am a huge introvert. Like, I mean, it probably doesn't come across in this conversation, and it certainly probably doesn't come across to people when I go out in front of a crowd to talk about wine. And now, I mean, you could throw me into a stadium of 10,000 people, and you'd ask, "And Mark, can you just blah 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 for 5 minutes to and I can. It's kind of because if you went back to my pre-hospitality days, let's say when I was in early 20s, when I was doing the other degrees and things, I was the shyest person you ever met. Like I couldn't, like I was that person in high school. I could barely talk, like I couldn't talk to people. I had a very, very tight little friend group. We were not the cool kids. We were nerds, and through university I really didn't build any great big friendship groups. I luckily played sports, so that helped. That was my one outlet in that time of my life uh to talk, because I had to, like I had to command a team as the captain. So that was the greatest thing about hospitality, is that I was so introverted for most of my life until I started working in hospitality. And then it forced me. And so it forced me to go and be able to communicate with people and talk with people. And it is, as you said, a stage performance for me. So when I'm doing this, or I'm talking to, hosting a wine dinner, I treat it like sort of like acting, and that I can do these things now, thankfully, because of the hospitality business, forcing me to become extroverted for very short amounts of period of time. So I can't do a cocktail party. I always say this, like, do not throw me into like, these what they call those like business meet and greet cocktail party things. If I don't know somebody and then I got thrown into it, Tracy, my partner, can talk with, there's 100 people in the room, she would talk to 98 of them. I would find I would be in that corner cowering because I am so scared of small talk and talking to people. Except for it's bizarre, but if you said, Mark, go onto the stage and talk for that 100 people right now about something in the wine world, I'm up there, gone beautiful. So I think it's been crazy that I think yeah, like I think introverts actually survive quite easily in the hospitality world. Maybe it takes a while for us to get in because you're not the person that are most obvious to hire because you're nervous and you're scared and you don't
Yeah.
want to really talk to everybody. But once in and you figure it out, man, I would say, and I got three children that I would say veer to the more introverted side. So I will be trying to encourage them as much as possible. And happily, like even my son, 16, got his first job, not in the hospitality industry, but like literally doing at a party store, selling balloons and stuff people need for parties. But he has to be at the front and talk to people. And I'm like, I'm so happy. That was like, if I'd been able to do that at 16 and got that at 16, I wonder where I would be in my life now. And I actually wonder if I would be in wine at all, if I'd figured it out before landing in the restaurant business and then naturally that taking me down a path and allowing me to explore my passions. But it had I been exposed and understood my how to transform from introvert to deal with introvertedness at an earlier age, I always do look back and wonder what would I have been. But I'm happy. So and this is it is a good field to be in. So so I mean I look back and wonder, but I'm not like I don't go and look back and say I what with regret. I just say I wonder what I would have been.
Do you feel that the wine industry has become more open and more tolerant to people with like various neurodivergency, being it either ADHD, introverts, or is it because the society overall is more accepting and the wine industry is just being part of the broader society? Or I don't know, because I feel like maybe it's the overall trend than the wine industry just falling in, or do you feel like the wine industry has its own pace of being more, let's say, open more faster or not?
Well, I definitely agree. Like society for sure is way more accepting. I still think we have a long way to go. I know as a general, I think society recognizes that neurodivergence, whether or not it's hard, it's going to take, I think it's going to take a long time. I still think even in like hospitality, like as we were talking before, just saying before, like it's very hard to hire that introverted ADHD person because the person's often at the top may not have gone through that. And so that person that is hiring, unless I still think we've got a long way to go to fully understanding it because I don't think as a extrovert or as a someone with maybe not the same mental health issues or any mental health issues, what we bring to the table sometimes in our introvertedness and our ADHD is also not always it can be subtle and hard to understand and it's going to take a really long time to empathize and support people when you don't completely understand. I think hospitality and wine world probably is a little more accepting because we are in the business of it. But yeah, I don't know. Like I think we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, I
I mean,
agree.
we are accepting, but it means it's going to take a lot
Yeah,
longer for
yeah,
people to
yeah.
truly understand.
I know people who still believe that it doesn't exist, that it's how it's called, the Zoomer's disease or whatever they call it. So it's something that's either not taken seriously or not even like considered as like an official diagnosis or stuff like that. So
And the danger too is it's almost like it's trendy now. Like it's trendy to say I have ADHD, and I'm like, well, do you? I
yeah,
mean, like because I mean, I have a lot of people say, oh yeah, I have ADHD. No, but do you really? Like, I mean, I know, like my brain is like, I almost. I don't know if it's for you or for others. Like at times I feel like I can feel like the buzz in my brain, and it's things aren't connecting. It's like it's strange to describe. But I actually for years. This is a bit, and then see this ADHD coming again. It's like take you off a path. This is when I was used to teach psalm programs, and I could start on Bordeaux, and somehow I'd be in Chile, and and people would go, Mark, back on track.
So you've also spoken openly about dealing with depression, also considering that wine business is, well, it's an alcohol beverage. So is it an aggravating factor? Is it fair to say that depression, living with depression, working in wine, is it more difficult because wine is an alcohol drink, or it doesn't
Yeah,
really matter because it's the same,
oh, it
let's
matters.
say, challenge?
It matters. So it's again a certain irony of me being in this business, being that I definitely have depression. It was, I mean, I come from a family of where my dad had, I mean, never diagnosed, but almost certainly bipolar, and a serious alcohol addiction problem. And that was not a happy child. I mean, not always a happy, I don't say it was an unhappy child. It was just like, it was a very, things are good and then things are bad, things are good, things are bad, things are good, things are bad, and then eventually he committed suicide when I was in my early 20s. And so I've lived with depression and anxiety since I probably say in my early teens, I would say. And so it is a bit of an irony. And so what I used to do in my late teens and early 20s was use alcohol as medication. And I think a lot of people in depression do that, that they take alcohol as a way of soothing the pain of the world, right? Alcohol takes you to another state. You can just kind of zone into another, and that's certainly what I think my father did, But me, I used it and I kind of just let it take me into I wouldn't say like I let alcohol soothe my angst and soothe my depression, and if it kind of let me escape from my own brain. And then I started to realize, and I went through a lot of like just psychotherapy stuff, and could go see a different psych, and eventually I learned to kind of understand that I have to be the most aware of this problem. And so I did not want to be my father and let it go to that. And I wanted to think of my kids and all that. So I created this. I mean, eventually I had to. And it took a while, but and then I went into drugs, and drugs have been great for me. But yeah, so I think in terms of like, it's just awareness. Mental awareness has become the most important thing for me, is to say I can live and love this wine world and this beverage alcohol world, but I am totally mentally aware of who I am and where and how it can play a role in my life. And it can't be a means to happiness. I enjoy it, but it is not the end all and be all to make me happy. Other things have to make you happy, and first, mental state.
Yeah. I think it's not mentioned enough or spoken enough. And I feel it's not an exclusive, as you said, it's not an exclusive problem to working in the wine world or the wine industry. But again, dealing with alcohol at such an easy access, I think it's a serious
Yes,
factor that not a lot of people consider.
that
And
is the biggest thing. Access, I think. You work in an office, you have the same problems. You don't have a cabinet there with 40 bottles of wine or 20
yeah,
bottles of scotch to say, hey, okay, you know. But when you work in the wine world, or you work, yeah, that it's there, it's around you. You
mm,
have an opportunity, and same with the restaurant world. It was for me when I was in there in the 20s, before I really kind of understood and changed my life a little more. It was in 30s. It was, yeah, okay, we've had this dopamine buzz, and we've gone through this this night of energy, and how that satisfies your brain. Then you have this when you're doing your cash outs and you're sitting and you're doing the reconciliations and you're doing all that, you have this major like you come down this, right? Like you go from high energy to very low energy really fast. And so you invariably, and I got caught into this, was I need to get that energy back up. Before I couldn't go right home because I had this high and then I came down and then I needed another little hit or two before I could, or three or six or eight or 10 before going home. And I think that's and so you would end up going with the other person that's similar to you, which there might have been three or four of you in your restaurant working together. And then you go, okay, we're going to the next door to the bar, right? We're just gonna have a beer, right? Wind down for after the night, and then that beer becomes two, and then four, and then you're at the after hours club, and suddenly you're back into this horrible. And at least this was me, of getting home at 4 in the morning, and you spent all the money you made, and you do it again. And so I think it is access is the challenge, is that and not only from where you work, but the environment and the community that you work in, that access is a huge problem. And not having that mental awareness to understand that. I think that's the biggest thing we need to train, is that mental awareness that alcohol is addictive. It is not a solution to these things, and being able to get people out of that
As I
circle
said,
of
it's not
behavior.
it's not something that's exclusive to hospitality, but hospitality with so many different factors, like I said, the pressure, the long hours, the physical part of it makes it, I feel like, on a new whole level. I have a lot of respect for people who do office jobs. I come from a corporate sector. And obviously, if we don't work in wine, nobody's going to die. It's not the job that's going to, support the whole planet through crisis. But I feel like there is a lot of aggravating factors, and people should pay more attention and be more aware, as you said. And on this kind of note, because we also kind of briefly touched on the burnout question, because I also feel like maybe in hospitality it's more intense because of how it is shaped at the moment. What would you say to people working in hospitality, or people knowing people who work in the hospitality? What would be the signs of the burnout that they need to pay attention to, be aware and to catch it, let's say, at earlier stage before it kind of goes into serious consequences?
Well, that's we all knew that answer. We'd be,
Existential question.
but I mean, I think I mean, obviously, I would say that you have to think about how your relationship with your friends. Are you one distancing yourself from your other friends? So I think maintaining a healthy balance. Are you maintaining a healthy balance of job versus real life? That's a key one. So, it is always a danger. And I probably had that danger of going into making the restaurant world my real world, even though it wasn't. So I think are you maintaining your other world? That's important. And are you doing things like we've just talked about? Are you doing things out of a need for self-medication, or a need for this energy blip? And yeah, it's hard to do to self-diagnose, but I think it's an important thing for all of us to constantly be doing a mental check on ourselves.
Well, speaking about the mental part of it, I also want to touch briefly the part about the physical disabilities. Because, in my opinion, if we say that the society and the wine industry is more open towards discussing the mental health, the mental issues, I feel it's lagging a lot in being open and being accepting of the people with physical disabilities. And I think the interview that has impacted me a lot was your conversation with Yannick Benjamin, who's the wheelchair sommelier and co-founder of Wheeling Forward. And I think listening to that and also remembering some of the examples of people I came across in the wine industry, I felt how far, far, far behind the wine industry is in dealing with people with limitations like accessibility, disability, and different issues. Do you feel the same? Would you agree that the wine business or the mere physical part of the hospitality work is very limiting to accepting the people
Totally,
with physical
totally,
disabilities?
totally, totally. I think, like I don't think we hardly talk about it at all. Like, and I hardly think that we apply too much in our business to accommodate, like, and I think I was actually, I'm gonna, and I talk about this as like I'm open-minded, and I was like, I'm gonna put me out there. I was looking at opening a restaurant and recently, and then might still do it. But then my partner said, "Whoa, but the bathrooms, you have to go downstairs." And I'm like, and I think I said, and I'm ashamed to say, but this is, to them, that, oh, what, I can't physically spend, $50,000 to accommodate 0.5% of my, and that is such a horrible, like, like, and that came out of my mouth, and and I'm, oh, and I hope people understand that I'm very open, like, I'm about inclusivity, and I obviously care, and I like, just that was like a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, did I really say that? Like, of course it's, like, why we have to think about that stuff. And but I think that is a part of the issue within the industry too, is that I'm sure most restaurateurs have that kind of thought processes, right? How do I, and especially in a very low margin business too, and it's not a justification of it, but it is a reality, is that when you talk about physical inclusivity and things like that, and you have all these costs to hope to make a relatively low profit margin. And then this is a good example. Do I spend $50,000 knowing that a very small percentage of people that may come to the restaurant would have severe mobility issues? Should I spend that $50,000? And probably, yeah, I should. But I know, but that is one of the issues around it. So we don't build a restaurant, and this is taking over space. So I mean, I think if it's different, if we obviously, if I was, I would never have said that if I was building, ground up, and would be, but it was interesting, and I wouldn't think about. I think I still would have troubles thinking, like, I just, as I were talking, I'm like, oh, would I think about corridors between my tables and making sure we have paths for people perhaps in wheelchairs, that, making sure that that you have accessibility throughout your space, and would I design my kitchen paths to accommodate that? What if I did have someone like Yannick working with me, and that Yannick or the person in the wheelchair that's serving, they wouldn't be able to reach the pass, or as a normal pass or a normal restaurant would be. And I think, yeah, so I think we're probably further ahead in the discussion of mental than we are physical.
Yeah,
And it's crazy that
curiously enough.
because we have laws now about when we do a new
Exactly.
build here, let's say in
Yeah,
Halifax,
yeah.
where I live, we of course have to have
Mm-hmm.
physically accessible bathrooms and ramps if you're on to get, or other means, elevators, other means to get people up to the restaurant.
Definitely.
So I think we do. I think we still have some ways to go, though.
Mm. No, for sure. If you go to a typical Parisian restaurants, forget about the spacing between the tables. I cannot squeeze past it, so it's definitely not meant to be. And I was also very, very surprised because on different occasions I go because of the let's say working in different events to very premium, luxurious wine establishments. In a lot of cases, you'll have an elevator that takes you up and then there's stairs. And you're like, how are you, yes, accommodating people who would like to visit you? And these are the establishments that for sure have the budgets to invest in it, but it doesn't
Yes.
occur to them. So it's really,
Yes,
I don't
yeah,
know,
I would say they're those Grand Cru
surprising.
Classes of the world, and thinking about those stone steps up to the front doors, and that's it, or whatever. They don't necessarily, do not have mobility plans in
I'm
place.
not saying nobody is doing that. Of course, there is a lot of
No,
progress,
of
but
course they
for
are. But
what came as a surprise to me that, as you said, that we somehow advanced far more even though there's still a lot to do in the mental health awareness versus the physical disabilities. And this is, I don't know, maybe it's a shock only to me, but in line. And I think that will be a good spot as well to shout out to your friend Michelle in this segment of people not maybe in the direct way of living physical disabilities, but going through a lot of issues not directly concerning, but also I feel in many ways impacting their life. And I was really touched by your post in support of Michelle's current situation. If you want to explain maybe a little bit in a
Okay.
couple of
Yeah.
phrases.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Those that don't know, I have a friend. Her name's Michelle Leard. I originally met her as Michael Leard, and so Michelle, she's transgender, and so she's been. I mean, going through the process of that, and I think it's hard because I can only imagine. And I think Michelle has some of her own struggles, obviously, not just past being the obvious struggles of being a transgender person in the world, which I can't imagine, but has a little bit of depression issues too. And so I think, like I can't imagine being someone that has that extra challenge. I don't know what to call it challenge, but I don't know what the right word is. That it's hard enough having mental health issues, but then adding in society and like nobody would know that, yeah, I can walk down any street, go to any restaurant, go to anywhere. I don't have to die. I don't have to, nobody knows, right? But when you have obvious differences, whether it's a disability like Yannick in a wheelchair or Michelle that, is in that transition period, I can't imagine, what that is and how challenging that must be. And I'm proud of her because she's the most amazing brand person I know and designer. But it is, I think she's brave. I think she's incredible person. And I just say anybody that's going through that process, how rewarding it must be in some ways, but how challenging it also. Like wow, impressive. You have to be a little bit brave too. So good honor to do it, and good on Yannick for being such a too. We're talking on this physical disability side about being such a good advocate for it. And I loved, you would go not to go back too far to Yannick, but I loved his attitude. Like, he's doing all these things, but he also had just a kind of get shit done attitude, like,
Mm,
so it's like, yes, we have to do this and we have to make people more aware, but he wasn't like it wasn't the way he talks about it wasn't from a poor me or poor
mm,
them.
mm,
It's about doing the right thing and let's just get the shit done. And he's whether he was, and Yannick shouldn't. I think one of the things I learned about Yannick too is we talk about him in the context of being in a wheelchair and what that is and being a wheelchair psalm and the challenges and what he's done in his businesses to accommodate and adapt his businesses to be accessible. But fuck, the guy's just a good psalm. Like he's just a great song. So I think I don't I and one of the things I came away with that discussion about Yannick was, yeah, he's incredible for not getting down on himself after the accident and doing this and being a champion. But he's also just a really, I think, really knowledgeable and incredible wine
mm.
person. So I don't want us to go back to when we think about my interview with Yannick to only concentrate on the accessibility pieces. I just want to celebrate that Yannick is probably one hell of a song.
Mm. No, I think it's the most important is to see the actual person behind all of the different factors that influence our lives, the ones we discussed. But also, I think for me, at least, the key takeaways from talking to you is that obviously there is more awareness. There is a lot of people speaking about balance and being more open and trying to be more inclusive about different factors, different personalities, different people's features. And as a society, obviously, we have a lot to work on. But I feel like the wine business is such a special angle if you look at any of these issues that, yeah, it's making it, I don't want to say more difficult, but definitely very different from a lot of other jobs and communities, and more challenging in a lot of ways because of these factors like wine itself and hospitality side of it and moral of it. I don't want to, because, well, thank you for being so honest and transparent about very difficult topics. And I wish there were more people talking about it and actually doing something about it as well. But I want to close this off on a maybe more positive note, as I want to have two tips for you. One is a wine that me and my followers absolutely need to try. It can be a style, a region, or a specific producer, and a wine region people who love wine absolutely have to visit. So you need to tell us a wine and a wine region.
Well, I mean, it will come as a surprise because I'm obviously a psalm working in a very small part of the world. So I will continue to do what I champion most, which is tell people that if you have not had traditional method sparkling wine from where I live in Nova Scotia, you are definitely missing out. So if you are a lover of great traditional method bubbles, you need to go to try Nova Scotia sparkling because it is exciting. It's like champagne. It's like the style of champagne from 30 years ago. It's linear. It's expressive. It is got a focus that I wish I had, but it's focused and delicious. So if you haven't, the great producers are Benjamin Bridge, Lackady Vineyards, like when Wolfville, Blomden makes a couple good ones. So those are that is where you have, and then wine regions. Well, obviously, I mean, I could just stay on Nova Scotia, but I do get to travel around the world a lot, and I think just from a pure like I think the world wine world knows this. It's no great secret, but I still think that the Western Cape of South Africa is, from a perspective of natural beauty, quality of wines, the affordable pricing. I'm a big fan of South Africa, so I love. I think if I was to just drop myself in a piece of vineyard space where I knew I was going to have good wine, not too expensive, great food that's not too expensive, great views. I just drop myself in the Western Cape somewhere, Franschhoek or Stellenbosch or in that area. Like I know it's probably not the coolest kind of answer to that story, to that question, but man, it always amazes me when I go there. The high quality, like we don't get it here in Canada very often. We get the bulk South Africa stuff, which is like the same as bulk wine you get anywhere. But if you're willing to spend just a few bucks extra, spend in Canadian terms $20 to $30, in euros, like let's say 13 to
Mm.
18 euros, 20 euros, what you can get out of South Africa is amazing.
Well, thank you again for this amazing conversation. I really enjoyed. I hope it is helpful and will be helpful to whoever is listening to that. Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
so
and I think
open.
if anybody has mental illness issues, please and wants to somebody to talk to, or just I am an email or a phone away.
A huge thank you to Mark for joining me today and sharing such honest and thoughtful insights about health, neurodivergency, and life in the wine world in general. I really appreciated this super honest discussion about mindful drinking and health and wine in generally, and while debating about whether the industry is inclusive and supportive enough. Spoiler, it is not. And I do feel there is so much to reflect on still. So on a side note, as Mark mentioned, if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health or depression, please remember you're not alone. Reach out, seek help, and just talk to someone you trust. And as Mark mentioned, you are free to message myself or him, and we will be happy to talk about it. And before we go, a very happy early birthday to Mark, actually, who's celebrating on the 22nd of December. So if you wish to drop him a message, I'm sure he'll be very, very happy. For me personally, this episode has inspired me to consider doing a dry January experiment. I already practice zebra drinking and zero alcohol weeks, but I'm curious to explore how it feels to work in wine and try a full dry January, especially here in France, where the culture around moderation and abstaining is still evolving, to say the least. So I'll keep you posted on, well, how it goes. Thank you so much to all of you for listening this year, for supporting the podcast, for spreading the love of wine, and for being part of this reflective journey into the world of wine. I hope you have a restful, a fun, and mindful holiday season, and I cannot wait to share more thoughtful, insightful conversations with you in 2026. So see you next year. Bye.